Hey everybody, I'm back. It's January the 5th, and where I live in Vancouver, it's 8:25 p.m. and we're in for another one of these magazine walkthroughs. A subscriber made a comment about my last walkthrough that I did, and they liked it, so I thought, well, I like them too. And because I like making videos with no edits and they're easy to do, I thought, well, hey, let's do another one of these things. Now, normally I would like to have my Warsteiner or my Tuborg or one of these beers, but you know what? Today we're doing it with a cup of coffee. So can't guarantee it's going to be as good, but you know, we'll work with it. All right, so let's get underway. So the magazine that I decided to pick for today is a first issue of another sci-fi magazine, not too different from Starlog. The main difference being that it's a UK-based magazine. So it's called Starburst, and it's 50p. So you'd have to be in the UK to understand what that really cost you back in 1978. But yeah, this is the time period when Star Wars had just come out in '77, and people were all excited about that. Star Trek was in reruns and growing in popularity, and sort of between Star Wars and Star Trek, you had a sort of a science fiction revolution going on. So before that point, there were, of course, other science fiction shows. You know, War of the Worlds stands out as a great movie, for example. But actual impact on pop culture, Star Trek and Star Wars definitely made the biggest impact. So let's, without getting too wordy here, let's just dive into this this magazine, and let's see what it had to offer people back in the 70s. So right away we can see that it's heavily picture focused, which of course that's what all these magazines were focused on doing. But one of the things you'll find with certain magazines, some are aimed more for kids, and some have a little bit more substance to them. And you noticed probably in my last walkthrough of Starlog that there was quite a bit of actual decent coverage of Star Wars, or Star Trek, excuse me, in that with, you know, an episode guide and so on. So in this particular one, we're going to look at how this magazine sort of, what approach they take to this type of genre magazine. So right off the get-go, we see we got a table of contents. They focus in on the writers of Star Trek, which, you know, I mentioned, I think last time I did a walkthrough. I was surprised at seeing some of the names of the writers that showed up in Star Trek. So they, of course, capitalize on this as well. This particular magazine, as we'll find out as we go through it, it takes a little bit of a different approach too from some of the other magazines that I've walked through with you guys. So let's dive into it. All right, so right off the bat, writers of Star Trek. So strangely enough, I'm not exactly sure why, but it seems like the pictures in this magazine are like negatives, like they're reversed. And I noticed that with a lot of the black and white stuff. When it, like, color pictures are fine, but when it comes to the black and white printing, for whatever reason, they're like negatives. So it's kind of weird. Creates a weird effect there. But anyway, yeah. So right here they start talking about the writers of Star Trek. And I won't bore you with getting into too deep a detail, but one of the things I do like about the way they do this particular magazine is they highlight the key programs, television programs or movies, and they bold them so you can kind of skim through and pick up different things. Like, for example, Captain Video. Well, that was a UK thing, but for example, The Twilight Zone and The Outer Limits are things we'd probably be more familiar with in North America, Canada, US. But I love it that they kind of like highlight the stuff for you, because then you can kind of like zoom in on what they're talking about. Or if you remember, if you read the whole story, you can kind of zoom in on certain features. So I kind of like the fact they do that. It's not just a sea of text, but it's sort of like highlighting some of the what they're talking about there. So I'll let you, if you want, you can pause it, read that if you like. Moving on. So yeah, we get into the writers of Star Trek. Of course, Gene Roddenberry would have been an obvious writer because he was the creator of the show. But yeah, he of course talks about his influence, what he wrote about DC Fontana. Interestingly, Richard Matheson. Now there you go. There's a name. One of my favorite authors, actually, and early science fiction, I guess horror writers. He wrote some great stuff for TV, and yeah, like think of some of this stuff. Like, for example, The Fall of the House of Usher, Duel. Like that's the first Steven Spielberg TV movie that was quite amazing. The Night Stalker. I mean, I Am Legend. If you read the book, it's awesome. The movie is it's pretty good, but the book is great. He wrote for Twilight Zone, Terror at 20,000 feet. Like, amazing stuff. So Matheson being involved with Star Trek, you can't go wrong. That's awesome. And I think I mentioned Theodore Sturgeon. He was involved with it. Harlan Ellison, he's kind of a funny guy. I love City on the Edge of Forever, and Harlan, bless his heart, was a character, but not my favorite, writer. I've read some of the stuff. It was okay. He was more of a controversial figure in science fiction, and he liked to kind of stick it to the man, so to speak. It was sort of the 60s and the hippies and all that jazz. So, yeah. Yeah, Robert Bloch, again, amazing authors. Getting involved in TV. This was sort of the golden age of TV when, you had a lot of people wanting to get in on this stuff and writing great stuff for TV. So, yeah, moving on here. So yeah, now here's the funny thing. So this is where this magazine kind of is quite different from, Starlog. This one actually features a lot of like little cartoon sort of sketches, or almost, I guess, sort of like eerie and creepy, I guess, where you have little comic book sort of stories captured. That's where this one is similar in that sense, but it's not entirely. It covers the science fiction world, but then it has these little things. Yeah, again, Star Wars, Buccaneers of Space. And of course, again, like I mentioned, it seems to be like a negative here. It's weird, but yeah, that's actually Luke Skywalker, but you sure couldn't tell because that's all supposed to be white, because that's the Stormtrooper outfit. That's supposed to be black. His face is supposed to be white. It's bizarre. Anyway, yeah, there you go. So Mark Hamill, of course, in his iconic role as Luke Skywalker, and of course Han Solo, chewing Chewbacca. And yeah, and then you got yourself some great shots of the special effects that went into Star Wars. Definitely a groundbreaking movie if you were around to see it in the theaters, or in my case, I watched it in a drive-in. And what I remember most from it was my dad passing out because he was drinking some Coke or something, and he was watching it, and it wasn't his deal at all. And he passed out, and along came the Coke with him, and right landed on his crotch. So you can imagine how much he loves Star Wars. But for me, being a little kid, I loved it. Best show ever. And of course, we got the what do they call these guys? Tusken Raiders, I think they're called. Anyway, you got these guys. Yeah, I remember when these guys showed up. It was pretty awesome. I think one thing I really remember about Star Wars that really was different from a lot of the other stuff you saw in science fiction was the sets. They were all real sets. They were all real, costumes and everything. No CGI. So like the work that went into building these sets and outfits, and it was great. That's what made it stand out. It drew you into the story, and it made you believe it was real, or in a cinematic sense. So that really stood out from what had come before it. So here, of course, we have the trash compactor scene, the bar scene. You got the attack on the Death Star, and just showing you how much the influence of Hammer films and things like that is concerned regarding people involved in bringing us Star Wars. You got a major face of the Hammer films, Peter Cushing showing up in this show. Yeah, and then of course the final scene, they win the battle, and at that point, there was they had a lot of finality to Star Wars. You didn't expect it to come out with the, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, and all that has come after it. I don't know about you, but I'm seeing the latest iteration of Star Wars, and it isn't my Star Wars. It isn't what I grew up on, and I'm not one of these people who are all about, I don't like having girls in this show. I don't care, but I just wish they'd come up with some good stories. Like the stories of the original Star Wars were awesome, and they were akin to sort of like westerns, a little bit of swords and sorcery, a lot of stuff like that. And now I'm just seeing a lot of, I don't know, the stories just don't jump out at me. There's a lot of wasted aspects to the show. Like they'll go into some detail, and then later on it's never really used. It's just sort of, it's not that cohesive, I guess I'm trying to say. But I mean, I'm not knocking, I really like The Mandalorian and the little Baby Yoda thing going on there. That's great. Like they did a good job with that, in my opinion. But then you kind of get the latest bunch of stuff coming up, and I wanted to like it more. It wasn't terrible, but I wanted to like it more. Let me just say that. Okay, enough me just blithering here. So again, we get back into kind of like a little cartoony, comic-y thing here. So if you want to read that, you're welcome to it. And carrying on, Jeff Hawke. Yeah. Definitely seeing some influence of maybe 2001 or Star Wars in this show, or in this comic. All right. And you can, of course, pause this stuff to read it if you like. And okay, now this is, again, I love seeing the ads. To me, the ads really make it. So here we go. How do you sell Star Wars to people? How do you cash in on it? You sell the little projectors, and you sell, relive it, So here you go. There you go. There you can send off 1995 pounds plus shipping, I guess, or a sound projector, 165 pounds, whatever that is. I don't know, adjusted for inflation and all that. I don't have a clue what that might be, but you can imagine what that might have set you back. But some people would have been into it, they would have went for it. And look at some of these things you can get. Design Adventure. Now that's actually pretty cool. Earth versus the Flying Saucers. There's a movie. 20 million miles to Earth. Giant Claw. Now the Giant Claw. That would be well worth getting that projector just for that show alone. The Giant Claw. If you haven't seen the Giant Claw, you've got to see the Giant Claw. It is a giant claw, and it's like a battleship, a flying battleship. Yeah, so it looks like Apollo 16 and 17. What would that have been? That's interesting. I wonder what that would have covered, just like the moonshots, maybe. Huh. Yeah. War of the Worlds. That's actually a very good movie. Very good. All right, so there you go. There's some ads for you. All right. And more ads. And then we're talking about things to come. So what can we look forward to in 1978? Woohoo! So let's take a look at this ad here first. So I actually have this, believe it or not. I think I have it in PDF format, the science fiction films thing. I think I might have got it from archive.org. I'd love to get the other ones, the classics of the horror film, television, fantastic television. These are really cool old books. Maybe I should do. Tell me if you guys want me to do like a flip through some of those. Although they're probably pretty long, so it might not work. But anyway, I digress. So yeah, this, like just looking at these, look at the great shows that were around back then. You got the Avengers, the different Avengers, of course. You've got the I Dream of Jeannie, Batman. You've got Superman. You got Star Trek. You got Twilight Zone. You got I'm not sure, $6 Million Man. I'm not sure what these two are. That could be the Outer Limits. I don't know. But great shows back then, right? Anyway, so there was Doomsday Dramas, and you might just look and see what you think. They mentioned that like a remake of The Thing, but that didn't come until like the 80s, like 81 or something. So I don't know if it was already in production or a remake of The Thing from another world. It certainly was an awesome remake. I mean, it blows the first one out of the water. In my opinion, it's definitely one of the best sci-fi horror alien movies ever. Just because the practical special effects are just beyond. I remember seeing it for the first time and just like when the guy gets I don't want to ruin it for you if you haven't seen it, but when the guy gets has a heart attack and then they use the paddles, that just blew my mind. That's just an awesome scene. So I'll leave that to you if you ever want to do that. So then they talk about in the Star Wake. So obviously, it was all about some interesting things going on in films and television, largely influenced by Star Wars. So you got some interesting shows that come up. You can read about it. I don't want to bore you. But Close Encounters of the Third Kind they mentioned there. That was really cool. Then of course, right on here on this page here, we got Starship Invasions. Look at that. Now, is it me or does Does Christopher Lee look kind of like sad? I'm sorry, but he does. And have you seen this thing? Oh my God. if you were him, yeah, I'd have that expression right there. Being a part of that after being like, uh, Hammer is like, say, Dracula, it's iconic and amazing, and then he's in this. Anyway, moving along here. I noticed actually that Food for the Gods is being mentioned again, wow. Star Crash, whoa. Now that was quite the Star Wars ripoff if you haven't had a chance to see that. The return of Pal, George Pal. I don't know if you know who that is, but if you do, he was involved with War of the Worlds. I think I mentioned already. It's a great show. And I believe he did Logan's Run. He was a great science fiction guy. Name in science fiction, I guess. Buck Rogers, they were seeing that coming up, and of course that did materialize in a movie, and then later in a TV series. There you go. So things to come. Things to come. The Incredible Melting Man. Do you remember that one? I don't. Was that even a thing? I don't know. But if you actually want to just look at some of the names in this, the upcoming things, they're awesome. Like, if they aren't good, they're funny because they're bad. Anyway, so those special effects actually look pretty cool. Look at that 70s look, the 70s look, the little mustache, the feathered hair. All right. All right. So, okay. In the news, Happy Days. There was a show. It's not science fiction, but man, that had a huge influence on pop culture and all the youngsters back in the day. Man from Atlantis. Hey, have you seen this thing? This was Patrick Duffy's big break. If you don't know who Patrick Duffy is, he later became like a soap opera star essentially in one of the evening soap operas that ran back in the day. But his first big role was Man from Atlantis. And as a kid, I remember like we all tried to swim like him. So see it, go watch an episode of it. You'll know what I'm talking about. So we're all in the pool doing his swimming maneuver. All right, Logan's Run. Yeah, that was a great. The movie was great. TV show. And then of course you can get books. Why not, right? So look at this. You got Harry Harrison. Great Balls of Fire, A History of Sex in Science Fiction. All right. Yeah. The Sword of Shannara. That was actually done on TV not that long ago. It's obviously an old book. Didn't know that. Demon Seed. That was made into a film. I remember that. George Lucas, Star Wars. Yeah, so there you go. I hate to say it, but I love the ads more than I like most of this stuff. Pass the Book, an Irish TV report on the origin of modern science fiction. Well, I love this graphic. Look at that. That's cool. Very cool. That reminds me of Slan. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. There's a science fiction story. I see he mentions Soylent Green. It's highlighted there. Again, great. Another great movie concept. I mean, the reason why they never made a Soylent Green 2 is because, well, how would they end it? Soylent Green is still people. Anyway, yeah, there you go. So if you want to read that article, it's there. You can pause it and read it. I tried to make this as big as I can for you guys so that you can actually read it. And we're heading into another comic, Jeff Hawk. So there you go. Yeah, heavily influenced by 2001, for sure. All right, the making of Star Wars. Now, again, why these negatives? Like they're negatives. So strange. Anyhow, so do you remember when after Star Wars came out, then on TV, there was these specials, the making of Star Wars? Because let's face it, kids wanted to know, how did they make the little spaceships fly around and shoot each other and all that stuff? And it was groundbreaking miniature model work done for Star Wars. So they get into that, of course, and then the work of George Lucas, his other films. Yeah, I heard it. I actually heard it said once that he wasn't that happy that it was Star Wars was being considered like a kids movie or kids show. And then so he was kind of down on that, but of course, you know, he was laughing all the way to the bank once it became so popular. And then there was toys and all that other stuff. And yeah, so he was a bit more of a serious filmmaker, trying to make kind of these, you know, big idea movies like THX 1138 or you know, American Graffiti. You know, so yeah, the making of Star Wars. Yeah, so I remember seeing some of those shows when they were on TV back in the day. Yeah, you know, and here's the thing where I'm not going to read all this stuff, but you can, you know, they mentioned some great shows like and the Andromeda Strain, very dated now, but I remember seeing it back in the day. It was really makes you think, that one, especially in the light of, you know, COVID. Or Silent Running. There's another interesting show that really stands out from a lot. Again, probably too dated to be watchable, but yeah, those were some pretty cool things. Now, what I want to focus in on here is the pictures. Now, like in times past before Star Wars, what really set the difference between Star Wars and other past stuff was just the work that went into the sets and the characters and stuff. So look at this, you know, the C-3PO outfit, and they shot it in this cave setting, and then they have all these, like, this isn't CGI, these are like real, like actual models built, not models, but you know, like mock-ups built of the X-Wing fighters and the Millennium Falcon entrance, and all this stuff would have been huge money. And then all these outfits would have had to been made for all the stormtroopers, and they didn't have just one, they had like tons of these guys. I think there's a scene where they're like all lined up, like, you know, it looks kind of like Nazi Germany. But yeah, so crazy. Like that's what made this show such a significant difference than a lot of the other ones. Again, look at this. These are all practical effects that had to be built. Look at all the extras they had standing here as they do this final scene in the end of Star Wars, or the little, whatever they call these things, the little guys who capture droids and stuff. Yeah, it's crazy, right? The work that went into that. It's no wonder it was such a great show. Yeah, and then of course there's fantastic film books. So yeah, they mentioned a bunch of stuff here. Films of Boris Karloff. Oh yeah, some great art books. Yeah, this would be cool back in the day. Yeah, I gotta say, that would be really awesome. These would be awesome books to have back in the day. They're really hard to read probably for you guys, but anyway. moving on. Star Trek. Yeah, back to Star Trek, right? So, yeah, great show. I remember Forbidden Planet. It mentions Forbidden Planet here. And I remember seeing Forbidden Planet, and I'd seen it after Star Trek, right? And I thought to myself, I can see how Forbidden Planet was deeply influential on the production of Star Trek in its level of technology and special effects. But yeah, if you haven't seen Forbidden Planet, it's well worth it, even despite it being so old. It's Leslie Nielsen. I think before one time I said it was Liam Neeson, but it's Leslie Nielsen. He was a great comedic actor, but he played a serious part in that one. But yeah, see it. It's great. It's a good show. If you like science fiction. I mean, it's a great. I think there's certain shows you should always see if you're a science fiction fan. One of them is, Forbidden Planet. Like I mentioned, Logan's Run. There's all these influential, groundbreaking sort of shows you should probably take a look at. All right, moving on here. We got more on Spock's Brain. Hey, have you seen that episode? That's great. That's a good one. They steal Spock's brain to power a city or something. One of the things you'll notice when they're talking about like the writers and why it was tough for them is they'd come up with a great story, but the executives, at Paramount would go, "Hey, look, this is we have a limited budget. You got to have it shot within, our soundstage, within a couple of rooms or something." So they would have to rewrite the stories. So some of the writers would get pissed about that because you write a great story and then they butcher it, and your whole concept of what you had in mind doesn't resemble what comes out in the final product. But the thing is, it's TV, right? It's not written books. You can write about amazing, gigantic cities and everything else, and you can't do that in TV, and especially back in the times of Star Trek, especially before things like CGI. So yeah, there you go. But it talks about some of the writers and their struggles. I know Allison was pissed off at the way they did his story. He didn't like it, but he got an award for it, and he accepted the award, and then this took off. So he was one of those guys. Yeah, and again, they're pulling all of the stops. The writers of the Star Trek episode guide here. So remember how we talked about the other, magazine went into a, thorough episode by episode kind of thing. This one, again, they're talking about all the writers involved. So very in depth actually for what it was back in the day. Yeah, great special effects for what they were. This shot even here, pretty cool. Yeah, and in the backgrounds, that's one of the things they managed to do is have these beautiful painted backgrounds to give the impression, where the actors would be kind of here, and then these were, mixed in with it to give the, the impression of a giant city or whatever it might be. So that was kind of a cool backdrop, class shot, paintings. So imagine your backgrounds are painted, hand painted, amazing. Starburst. Oh, look at this. Oh, you just had to use the washroom. Oh, look, it says WC. So you know what that means. That's got to be like an English expression, water closet. Okay, so there you go. You can pause and appreciate that. Actually, I like the art. Nice art in this one. All right, and that's it. That's the back of the magazine. That's a little long. I didn't mean to go 34 minutes, but anyway. So hey, if you like this kind of thing, I decided to do a quick one. No, unfortunately I didn't have any beer, so it's not going to be as good, but hey, I hope you enjoy it anyway. So thanks for the subscriber who commented on my last video, because then at least I know you guys somebody likes this stuff. And I got another subscriber, so I'm pushing 7 subscribers. So I hope you'll still like my content. Don't know how many of these I'm going to do, because it's going to get repetitive, I think. But I'll do some more tech videos and whatever short videos when I'm out and about. So anyway, whatever you're doing, hope you're enjoying your evening, and I'll talk to you later.